Sorry, Biden's staff hoped his speech would reassure voters about his mental fitness, although it got off to a rough start when he said, "Good evening, my fellow Americans," and Vice President SpongeBob. Anyway.
Ah, yes. Those hilarious late-night pranksters, they get funnier and funnier, don't they? Well, not really. I'm just being kind. Ban dun 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 dun. Ban dun 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 dun. Very hostile political party. Very hostile. Joe Biden out there being Mr. Hostile. So many remarkable things to discuss. The Washington Times front page. Biden outlines divide with Republicans. Meaning, once again, he was a divisive. He pretended for about a minute 3.5 years ago, I'm going to be a uniter. He's the most polarizing, divisive president, probably since Jefferson Davis. Biden outlines divide with Republicans and with America. Embraces age. Depicts Trump as threat to integrity of America. And then he fell down a flight of stairs. It was kind of funny. There wasn't even a flight of stairs there, which is the strange thing. Where did that flight of stairs come from? Also, the Republicans passed a bill in the House of Representatives. That's kind of unusual. They passed a bill in the House of Representatives yesterday, the Laken Riley bill. Laken Riley was, of course, murdered and had her head smashed in by an illegal alien from Venezuela that Joe Biden waved into the country. Laken Riley bill clears House chamber just hours before presidential speech. Now let's see if the Lizard King over in the Senate kills it, Chuck Schumer. Because it is worth noting that the Democrats didn't love this Laken Riley bill. But Republicans made sure that Laken Riley, the nursing student whose killing has been blamed on an illegal immigrant, would be part of President Biden's State of the Union Day, hours before Mr. Biden was slated to speak and showed up 20 minutes late and then took 20 minutes getting down the aisle. The House passed the Laken Riley Act, which blames the president for Riley's death, appropriately so. In fact, he should be charged as an accessory before the fact, and then he can claim that he's immune to prosecution. That'd be fun. So the Laken Riley Act blames Joe Biden for young Laken Riley's death and imposes rules that could have prevented the catch and release of the Venezuelan illegal alien, it says migrant, accused in her slaying. Riley was killed 2 weeks earlier while out for a morning run on a college campus in Georgia. The vote highlighted the power of Riley's death. More than 36 Democrats joined Republicans in the 251 to 170 vote to pass the bill. Now, let me pause there for a second. 170 Democrats voted to spit on her grave because they don't care about human life, and their view is you got to break a few eggs to destroy the United States of America and to make an omelet. So 170 Democrats voted against the Laken Riley bill. And Michael Piercy and I were talking about this morning. Said if you reverse this and the Democrats were passing a bill based on a young woman that was brutally and savagely murdered by someone that shouldn't have been here in the first place, and 170 Republicans voted against it, the Democrats would be standing on the steps in front of the Capitol with every TV network camera in front of them, and they'd be singing a bad song, and a couple of them would cry and get teary for the cameras and say every Republican desecrated her grave and supports the murder of young women and the savagery and the brutality. But the Democrats vote against it. And the media says, oh, sure, they would have voted against it too, because they love crime. More Democrats, more murder. More Democrats, more carjackings. More Democrats, more looting. More arson. More mayhem. More assassins outside the homes of Supreme Court justices. The Democrat Party is a violent party. Oh, there were violent mobs outside the White House last night, too. Outside. Well, they were outside the White House as well, waiting for the motorcade to leave, chanting, "Kill the Jews, kill the Jews." And then there was another mob outside the Capitol, And that forced the presidential motorcade to be diverted because of the security threat. And that may have contributed to the president being late to the Capitol. And he was about 20 minutes late. And then the trip down the aisle, which would normally take 2 to 3 minutes, took about 15 minutes. It's all right. It's just the biggest audience of your life, and you're just keeping the whole country waiting, but no problem. I know you got to get your picture with, Chairman Mao or whoever it is, and your party waiting for you to come down. Yeah, and 170 Democrats voted against the Laken Riley bill because they don't want illegal aliens that come into the country illegally and then are arrested for committing crimes to face deportation. They want to get them green cards and your Social Security card and your niece and turn over your home to them. And then have them, you can pay for everything. You see that in, New York, Kathy Hochul's got all the illegals on welfare. Got them collecting paychecks. Aren't they amazing? Yes, they are. Yes, sir. All right, let's, the completely ridiculous Democrat Party and Joe Biden. Aren't they amazing? Yes, they are. Let's go to, so we're talking about Laken Riley. Let's go to Michael. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to line number 9. Number 9, Ron, calling from Glen Burnie, Maryland. Ron, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Morning, Chris. Thanks for taking my call.
You betcha.
Last night, when he was giving his speech, Marjorie Taylor Greene was yelling at him in the audience to mention Laken Riley, and he mispronounced her name. And then he admitted that thousands of Americans have been killed from illegal aliens because of his open border policy.
First, he called Laken, and Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of forced a button. She was wearing a button, a Laken Riley button, and she's wearing a Laken Riley T-shirt that declared, say her name, right? Because the Democrats, they're all about this. If a police officer shoots someone after being shot himself, which is what happened in this, with good old what's-her-name, who got shot by the police and killed because her boyfriend had just shot a police officer when they came through the door to serve a legal warrant. And Breonna Taylor was shot in the shootout with police. And now they're like, say her name. Now she's hanging out with her ex-boyfriend, who is a big-time drug dealer, which is why they had the warrant to raid her home, Breonna Taylor. And when they raided her home, her new boyfriend, jumped up with a gun and opened fire on the police and shot one of the police officers. The police returned fire, and Breonna Taylor was tragically killed. And they turned her into a cause celeb, and they're screaming, say her name, because she's hanging out with crack dealers and gun-toting criminals who shoot the police. And that's how you get in good with the Democrat Party, right? But when it comes to Laken Riley, and if you're George Floyd, a career criminal and a junkie, and you got fentanyl and methamphetamine in your system, and you are resisting arrest and you die of heart failure, then you're a hero of the Democrat Party, and they burn cities from coast to coast, right? But when it comes to Laken Riley, the Democrats won't even vote to hold people accountable who are in the country illegally and stealing things and committing other crimes once they're illegally in the country. They want to wait for them to murder people, and then they'll let them go without bail. Like they let those 4 people in New York go who were arrested for chopping up bodies and chopping a woman's head off, or at least concealing the body parts. And the Democrat Party is completely insane, Ron. They're demented, and they proved it again last night. And again, the mobs outside of Democrats supporting Hamas and angrily denouncing Joe Biden as being guilty of genocide when it's Hamas that is promoting genocide, and they are supporting Hamas. This is a mentally ill party. The political party is mentally ill. They should be institutionalized. But we've got Joe Biden last night with the Laken Riley thing. And I was checking the transcripts. The New York Times actually reproduced, again, I think it was voice to text. They actually quoted him correctly. He twice called her Lincoln Riley. He was talking about the Civil War before he got to, and honestly, it was just because Marjorie Taylor Greene started yelling at him to say her name. But, she didn't hang out with drug dealers, and her boyfriend didn't shoot a police officer before the police shot back. So she'll never be a hero of the Democrat Party, because the Democrat Party loves criminals and they love crime. They love George Floyd and they love Breonna Taylor. And honestly, her boyfriend shot a police officer inside her apartment when they came to serve a legal warrant. And the Democrats will defend the criminals every time and condemn the police every time. Now, he was, Joe Biden, talking about, and yes, the purpose tonight is to wake up Congress and alert the American people that this is no ordinary moment either. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War, which you guys started, the Democrats, have freedom and democracy been under assault at home by the Democrat Party in the American Civil War, just by the way, and then a Democrat who was an actor shot and killed the first ever Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. So I thought it was kind of funny that he brought that up. And he's also, Hitler was on the march, he says. He's talking about, and this is the opening statements in Franklin Roosevelt in 1941. Hitler was on the march. War was raging in Europe, his Socialist Workers' Party, Hitler's party. President Roosevelt's purpose was to wake up Congress and alert them. This was the language of civil war in the United States of America. And these were in the opening paragraphs of his remarks last night. So he's talking about Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War and World War II and Franklin Roosevelt. And this is supposed to be the State of the Union address. Ladies and gentlemen, the State of the Union is strong. He can't say that, but he told a lot of other lies. And then he's, not since Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War have we been in such a place, completely crazy. And then later on, and I want to play it for you, Ron, because Marjorie Taylor Greene started yelling at him to send. Again, he's going on and on about Congress and the Senate and politics, and he's not talking about the State of the Union at all. And he's a political loser. And then he's off to the races talking about Laken Riley.
It's not about him. It's not about me. I'd be a winner. Not really. What
about Laken Riley? Marjorie Taylor Greene says. What about Laken Riley? Say her name.
Laken Riley.
Says it twice.
An innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right.
Listen now.
But how many of thousands of people being killed by illegals? To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself. I understand.
It's not quite the same when you lose a child in a car crash, a car accident 50 years ago, or a very tragic event, or you lose an adult son to cancer, a tragic event, but not the same as an illegal alien waved into the country by you, bashing in somebody's daughter's skull and killing her. And then you brush it off and you call her Laken Riley. Old Yeller here is getting it wrong, and he called her Laken Riley twice. And the New York Times conveniently cleaned up the transcript for him, Ron. You'll be happy to know. The New York Times says, but how many thousands of people are being killed by legals? That's, Ron, what the New York Times transcript reflects. Is that what you heard?
Illegal. If I was Trump, I would make an ad out of that. I would get that ad where he said that, and I would make a campaign ad out of that. This is what Open Borders does, and he's proud of it. Thousands of Americans are being killed by illegals.
Yeah, well, they just cleaned up the transcript for him, just like the others did here. And honestly, the others, most of the others, didn't even include Lincoln in the transcript. They will assure you that he said Laken, he said it correctly. But that's because the news media, the most corrupt institution in the United States of America. You know that, right, Ron?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've had people that are for him, and I keep telling them, stop watching CNN.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, they just clean up the transcript. They sanitize it for you. They fix it for you. They just reproduce the remarks as prepared as opposed to the remarks as delivered. Oh, no, he said Laken. No, he said legal, not illegal. And since when do we call people legals? He referred, and then Nancy Pelosi came out. She was very angry. Well, he didn't mean to say illegals. We call them voters. What do they call them now? They call them newcomers. Yeah, newcomers. Yeah, but the news media, they clean up the transcript for the Laken Riley, and that's not in the transcript because they didn't have it in the original copy of the speech. He was not making mention of Laken Riley. So when they clean it up for him, they're filthy, corrupt, dishonest people. You know, the news media. They get lucite blocks and golden statuettes for this stuff.
How many of thousands of people being killed by illegals?
Hey, it's Chris Plant, excited to tell you about our July 2024 Listener Sea Cruise. We'll be sailing around the British Isles, visiting Scotland and Ireland. Please join us. Visit ChrisPlantCruise.com. Hey, last night was the big State of the Union. Want to talk to the nice people today. You know, you people. Normal people. Can you say you people? You can when you're talking to normal people. Let's go to Sean, calling from Greenbelt, Maryland. Sean, you're on the Chris Plant Show. Sean.
Oh.
There you are.
I told your call screener that I had read yesterday about that President Biden had gone to various Hollywood actors who had played presidents in movies to get advice on how to perform for the nation. And when I was watching last night, I thought, well, he's trying to be Michael Douglas, but he's not doing a very good job.
We played that yesterday. We played the Michael Douglas and Morgan Freeman and Bill Pullman. Yeah, and you're right. So last night, you think his impersonation, he was trying to be Michael Douglas in the movie The American President, I think his was, right?
Right.
How did it work?
It just, it fell flat. Actually, I only watched because I figured he would screw up so many times. But I was disappointed that there weren't more. If it had been a drinking game, you probably wouldn't have gotten drunk.
Depends on how you play. You know, you got to play with Irish rules, and then it works every time. But you're right, and it is funny that they got these Hollywood people, Morgan Freeman and Michael Douglas and Bill Pullman and a couple of others. Gina Davis was one of them who played the president in something. Yeah, and they created a fake little video because we live in an idiocracy, Sean, and the Democrats, they depend on the idiot vote. It's very, very important for them to hold on to the idiot vote. They like the criminal vote, too. If you're a criminal, you vote Democrat because criminals are for you, right? Now, you know that the Biden administration is doing everything they can to help the jihad, which is at war with civilization. And in particular, the United States of America, the Jews in Israel. And the Democrat Party, they're not on our side, the United States. They're not on the side of Western civilization. They're the left, right? And the front page of the Washington Post, below the fold, after they get over their sexual excitement for Joe Biden, U.S. to build temporary port to get aid into Gaza. I think we may have some audio on that, as a matter of fact. Joe Biden talking about building a port for the terrorists so we can get the terrorists more supplies so they can kill more Israelis, which is the Democrat Party's plan. And this is because, in part, at least, now they've been raising people while we weren't looking for decades now on being anti-Semites and being anti-Israel and chanting from the river to the sea. We didn't know how anti-Semitic college campuses were, like the president of Harvard, Claudine Gay. She checked several boxes. And the rest, at MIT and University of Pennsylvania, and all the anti-Semitism on campus and Jewish students not feeling safe, and this has been going on for some time. Then the savages attacked Israel and butchered all of those people and kidnapped and raped and tortured to death all those people, and they still have hostages, including lots of American hostages. Joe Biden, he doesn't have anything to say about that because he's not on our side. But he announced last night that in order to continue to help the jihad against Western civilization, and he's hoping he'll get a few votes out of it in Michigan, which is a key swing state. And if you're going to keep destroying the world, you need to stay in power. So he's got to kowtow to and pander to the Democrat Party's jihad wing. And the Democrat Party does have a jihad wing. Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib just scratching the surface on that. But the headline, below the fold, front page, A-sectional, Washington Post, U.S. to build temporary port. Nobody builds a temporary port to get aid into Gaza. And we're going to do that. Now listen to this. Emergency mission, in quotation marks, won't require American troops on the ground in Strip. And the word Strip is capitalized, as it usually is in Hunter Biden's laptop. Administration says, after dimming hopes that an Israeli-Hamas ceasefire and hostage release will be reached before the start of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Is that an important deadline? Because they kill lots of people during Ramadan every year. Don't worry about that. Worry your pointed little head about that. President Biden has ordered the U.S. military to construct a temporary port and pier on Gaza's Mediterranean coast to open a new route for providing humanitarian aid to the terrorist murderers of Hamas. I just added the last part to the Washington Post story. Administration officials, they're anonymous, described what they called an emergency mission. Now, I just want to point out one of the first contradictions here. There are many, of course. It says that the emergency mission won't require American troops on the ground in Strip. You can leave off in Strip, no American troops on the ground, right? And then the administration officials say that the emergency mission is U.S. military to construct a port. They're calling it a temporary port. So how does the U.S. military construct a port without having troops on the ground? Is it a floating port? Do we just pull it in with tugboats and it sits offshore? Do we push it up on the sand and pay no attention to the tides? How exactly do you recruit the terrorists to bring their sledgehammers and pound some rebars into the ground and hold their temporary pier? This is the biggest lie and the dumbest thing I've heard in years, even from Democrats. Just extraordinary. So they're going to magically, for the first time in the history of humankind, build a port on the beach of the Gaza, and this time the port won't require that anyone be on the ground. One of the most overused terms in Washington, D.C., turns of phrase. We've got troops on the ground. That's actually where their turn of phrase comes from. Now everybody says, on the ground for everything, but never mind that. That's a pet peeve of mine. So won't require U.S. troops is in the subheadline. And then in the first paragraph, President Biden has ordered U.S. military to construct a temporary port, scratch temporary. So he's ordered the U.S. military to construct a port, and the Washington Post assures us it won't require any troops on the ground. That's like a logic riddle. That's pretty extraordinary stuff. Big lies, big lies. And that is, who's that going to help? That's going to help the genocidal terrorists of Hamas, whose charter demands the extermination of the Jewish people and the elimination of the Jewish state that is Israel. And Joe Biden is on their side. In fact, we have Joe Biden on the floor of the House of Representatives last night, talking to a couple of dim-witted colleagues, including a smirking Secretary of State, who's not a bright man at all, and another, I guess, senator that I could care less about. And he says, what does he say? He says that he talked to Bibi Netanyahu. He talked to Netanyahu, you see, And he told Netanyahu that they're going to have a come to Jesus. Now, Netanyahu, if I'm not mistaken, is a Jewish man, right? And he's the prime minister of the independent state of Israel, which is pro-Western civilization. And the Democrats are not on his side because they're not on our side. But this is pretty extraordinary. And here he is. It's kind of hard to hear, but he tells these people that he's wagging his finger and he's looking all crazy. And he said, I told Netanyahu we're going to have a come to Jesus. Really, you should tell the Ayatollah that you're going to have a come to Jesus with him since you're sending him billions and billions of dollars.
I told him, baby, let me repeat this. I said, baby, you know I'm going to come to Jesus. Sure, just. That was good.
And that was good. And they're giggling, ha, you told the Jew you're having a come to Jesus. The Democrat Party is not what it used to be. They're completely demented, absolutely insane. But yeah, going to have a come to Jesus with Bibi Netanyahu. That's what he's going to do. Sure. Now I have an update on we're going to build a port and there'll be no troops on the ground. They're going to magically build a port from, maybe we'll come up underneath the sand and build a port. It's going to be magic. It's the biggest lie, but, well, maybe not even the biggest lie of last night because there were so many of them. But that's quite extraordinary. And it's on the front page of the Washington Post. And these frauds, Karen DeYoung and Sarah Dadouche, her name is Dadouche? Sarah Dadouche, Dadouch. What would you say? The Bears. And so they got DeYoung and Dadouche typing the story here. And they're like, oh, yeah, the Biden administration officials, whose names I can't use, but I'm dating them, they told me that we're going to build not just a pier, but a port. And we're going to do it without putting anybody on the ground. And Dadouche and DeYoung said, wow, that's really great. You guys are good. Are they going to use the pier to kill Jews? Yes, they are. Are you going to bring them supplies so they can kill more Jews? Yes, we're going to fund the enemy. They fund Iran. Obama funded Iran tens of billions of dollars. Joe Biden, billions and billions of dollars to Iran. Now we're going to help Hamas. And we're going to tell Bibi Netanyahu that it's come to Jesus time. So he's going to have to convert, I guess. None of this why don't you have it come to Jesus with the head of Hamas and say, hey, release the hostages. The American hostages first, release them. Release all the hostages, or we're going to drop bombs on you that you've never imagined. We've got the Moab, the mother of all bombs, more than 20,000 pounds. Ba-boom. How about that? And here's what you're going to do. You know that they're still firing rockets into Israel from the Gaza? And the Democrats and the New York Times and the Washington Post and DeYoung and Dadouche are fine with that. It's just amazing. The terrorists are still firing rockets and missiles into Israel. Where do they get all these rockets and missiles? Well, from Iran. Where did Iran get all the money for this? Well, from Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Don't worry about them. And the Washington, if you get your news from the Washington Post, it's the old Ronald Reagan line. It's not that liberals don't know anything. It's just that so much of what they know is wrong. So you're going to build a pier, a port, and nobody's going to put their feet on the ground in building a port on the Mediterranean Sea. Now, they've been building ports in the Mediterranean Sea for thousands of years, and every single time you had people with their feet in the sand building the port. But no more. Now, here's the funny part. I don't know how they make all this stuff funny, but they make stuff funny that shouldn't be funny. Pretty amazing. Just great. Here's the news out of, and it took CNN a long time to get to it. But they've been very proudly dropping what they call humanitarian supplies. I assume it's ammunition and piano wire for hanging people onto the Gaza people, to the terrorists of Hamas, who the Democrats care very deeply about, but they could care less about Laken Riley. They love radical Islamic jihadi terrorists 1/3 of the way around the world. But when it comes to Laken Riley, they could care less. And 170 Democrats vote against the Laken Riley bill because they could care less. That's a fact. And they love abortion so much. But if you want to club a baby harp seal to death to make a furry hat, then they will never forgive you. 66 million abortions is a good start, exterminating 40% of the black population in the womb every year. 400 out of every 1,000 black pregnancies. But, that's fine. Laken Riley, they could care less about. The babies, they could care less about. Hamas, they love. Now, here's the funny part. How do they make this funny? They do it all the time, don't they? Like they got the chopped up bodies on Long Island, the woman's head and the man's arm covered with tattoos. They catch 4 people, arrest 4 people, bring them in, and then they release them all without bail. How do they do it? They make body dismemberment and decapitation funny. Extraordinary. But here's the CNN headline coming in last in the news cycle. At least, we're dropping C-130 airplanes going in, pushing pallets of food out with parachutes and dropping them on the Palestinians. I was talking about this the other day because back when many years ago we were dropping relief supplies to the Kurdish people in northern Iraq, and they kept running underneath the pallets of supplies and getting crushed by the pallets of humanitarian aid. And so I changed the name of the operation to Operation Crush a Kurd. Operation Crush a Kurd. It was quite tragic. And the other day I was talking about this on the radio, and I said, they're going to do the same thing in the Gaza. Well, it has begun. At least 5 killed after airdrops. It's airdropped aid now. At least 5 killed after airdropped aid falls on them in Gaza. Now, how do they do this again and again? The crazy world, and it's important to be able to find the joke in everything, but how the U.S. government and the Democrats do this again and again. At least 5 killed after airdropped aid falls on them in Gaza, and they've got like 7 people writing this story. And it's Abir Zamal and Khaled Zanoun and Sophie Tano and Celine Akadani and Karim Chadar. At least 5 people were killed and 10 others injured when airdropped aid packages fell on them in the Al-Shati camp. Shall I translate Al-Shati for you from Arabic to English? It is pretty much what it sounds like. The Al-Shati, you don't want it wherever you go. You don't want to end up in the Al-Shati camp. Let me tell you that. West of Gaza City, according to journalists on the scene, Qatar al-Zahuni told CNN he witnessed the aid packages falling from planes over the Al-Shati camp on Friday, that's today, but cannot confirm which nation was behind the airdrop, because then they'll be the bad guys and they'll have to be attacked by the terrorists. This is literally killing them with kindness, right? Hey, we're bringing them food. Oh, they don't need it now. Maybe the survivors will be able to use the food. Mohammed al-Sheikh, head of emergency care department at Al-Shifa Medical Complex in Gaza City, confirmed 5 people were killed in the incident. Some of those injured in the incident transferred to Al-Shifa in serious condition, according to al-Sheikh. In a separate incident, footage obtained by CNN shows dozens of parachutes carrying parcels descending from a plane conducting an airdrop. The video was filmed. Video isn't filmed, but okay. In an area called Al-Sudani, northern city of Bet Leha. Sure. People can be heard screaming as the parachutes get closer to the ground. Well, don't stand under the big parachutes, you idiots. Their schools are almost as bad as ours. Not quite. Did you see the Washington, D.C. school? More than half of the high school students are chronic truants. More than half of the high school students. When they graduate, they plan on getting jobs as carjackers. A lot of openings in Washington, D.C. Killing them with kindness again. We're good at that. Bam, 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 bam. CBS News has much more information out of the Gaza and the 5 people killed by the aid package. They say the parachute failed to deploy. Bad things happen when parachutes fail to deploy. I say that as someone who's jumped out of 3 perfectly good airplanes. Just tandem jumps, but parachutes are good things when you're falling at 120 miles an hour. Officials from Gaza's Hamas-run Ministry of Health and an eyewitness told CBS News that 5 people were killed Friday by an airdrop package when at least one parachute failed to properly deploy and a parcel fell on them. They said the incident occurred by the Al-Shati refugee camp, and trust me, it is an Al-Shati refugee camp. People at the Al-Shati refugee camp in northern Gaza said the incident occurred around 11:30 a.m. local time. That was around 4:30 a.m. Eastern time. Oh, hey, yeah, it's daylight saving time this weekend. Don't forget that. We spring forward, and which is great. I'm in favor of that. And then on Sunday, the sun will go down at about 7 p.m. instead of about 6 p.m., and that's good. Find a patio, So CBS News was told there were 2 boys among the 5 people killed and that 11 others were injured in the incident. That's a big pallet. Let me tell you that. Problem is sometimes you do this and mobs of people go running to get underneath it so they can be the first ones there. And truth be told, that's not really where you want to be. That's what happened to the Kurdish people in northern Iraq when the same thing happened to them many years ago. Yeah. So they got that going. Now, it may not be us because CBS News reports that the United States, Jordan, Egypt, France, the Netherlands, and Belgium dropped aid over Gaza on Friday. That's today. They're just many hours ahead of us, What are they now? 7 hours ahead of us, I think. And so we got that. And, they're in an attempt to get supplies, including desperately needed food, to residents amid an ever-worsening humanitarian crisis because they're run by a terrorist group called Hamas, which is a gang of genocidal lunatics. By the way, when we build this port without putting any people on the ground, and ships come in with humanitarian supplies, and the armed terrorists come out and steal all the food and shoot people down, what do our troops do then?